Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining the book talk brought to you by the Jacobs Institute for Innovation and Education at the University of San Diego. We are so excited to have with us Dr. Katie Martin, author of the book Learner-Centered Innovation, Spark Curiosity, Ignite Passion, and Unleash Genius. And as you can tell from my virtual background, I have a copy of the book there. And Katie, we're just so happy that you could join us today.
Thank you. Me too. I'm always excited to connect and talk to you, Alina, and other educators, especially with so much happening in our world, and just kind of check in and see how we can support.
Wonderful. Well, I just have to say that I love your title. The topic of learner-centered approaches to education is so relevant. I feel like it's always relevant.
Yeah.
And it's definitely timely, especially given the current state of our world. But before we jump into the subject matter, Katie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Sure. We were just talking before everyone else joined. I started teaching as a middle school teacher. I moved to Hawaii. I grew up in San Diego, and I moved to Hawaii to teach. And I just fell in love with my middle school students and just enjoyed being able to teach them in ways that I grew up not loving school. So, I grew up as a kind of disengaged student. I got B's because that's what my parents told me I had to get, but I didn't really see the point of school until I went to college and thought, oh, I can learn things that I really enjoy, and I can find things that are interesting to me and read because I want to. And so I became an unlikely middle school English teacher because all through school, I didn't read a book. I decided, but when I was in third grade, that I hated reading because my teacher made me read The Mouse and the Motorcycle, and I hated it because I hated going home and filling in the chapter summary and A, B, C, or D. And so I just thought I could tell you the right answer without reading, and so I'm going to go do that. And so anyway, I went to taught middle school because I wanted kids to learn and read because they wanted to, instead of because they had to fill in the blanks. And so I had a series of roles that I just fell more and more in love with. I got to be a literacy coach and then a new teacher mentor to support new teachers coming in and really help them see how they could connect with their kids and create more learner-centered environments. And then when I moved back to San Diego with my husband, we moved back to San Diego with our two little kids, and I got to work at the University of San Diego, where Alina's work, and spend 5 years really working with districts and teachers around the county to better understand practices. And this is in a world where everybody was coming with one-to-one iPads and Chromebooks, and they said, now what do we do? And so got to spend time really understanding, what is the vision for learning? What are we really trying to accomplish? And how do we support teachers to really focus on kids and learning? And so that's really where I started combining my research and practice and pedagogy together. And so that is, I know that's kind of what inspired me too, to also think about how to write this book, because of all the things I was learning from so many awesome educators.
Wow, wonderful. So it sounds like you drew your inspiration from your middle school experience, your teaching experience, and communicating with other educators. That's wonderful.
Yep, that's how, you learn by doing. And every time I got to meet new people and see educators, I think one of the biggest pieces is a lot of teachers don't get out to see other people teach. And so when I became a coach, I finally saw so many different classrooms that I didn't understand or see practices when I was teaching by myself and isolated. And so, the more and more I got out to see different schools and classrooms, the more inspired I was by what was possible in education.
That's wonderful. And that's one of the things I love about the field of education, is that there's so much that you can learn from other educators. You just never feel alone. Just if you sit like 5 or 6 educators in the room, you will hear a lot of stories. You can hear about experiences, and you really can just really learn from one another. And so I really appreciate that about the field.
Yeah.
So who would you say is your intended audience for the book, Learner-Centered Innovation?
Yeah, I mean, in general, I would say any educator who truly loves kids and is inspired to make an impact on kids. And then, really it's about for teachers. And I say that because I think we're all teachers and we're all learners, but thinking about in our sphere of influence, sometimes people say, well, I can't make these big changes. It's just, I'm a teacher in the classroom. And I really want them to understand that if you're, classroom, school, or district, we can make these changes on various scales, but really to inspire teachers to see what's possible if they can't get out and see other classrooms, to get ideas and be inspired by what's happening and what's possible.
And I like that you stated that, because thinking about how teachers, their experience now, and that there's so much pressure coming, whether it's from standardized tests or getting through the curriculum, there's different approaches to learning that are constantly being, communicated to teachers.
Right.
And so sometimes, teachers can feel a little bit overwhelmed, or sometimes they can feel like it's intimidating. So with this learner-centered approach that you're addressing, how can this be helpful? How can you, as the author of this book, ease the fears of those teachers who maybe want to change their teaching style, but are also worried about all the pressures that are being put onto them?
Yeah. I mean, that's the $1,000,000 question. I think that at the end of the day, when I talk to teachers, they feel like, well, I can't do this because somebody else wants me to do something. And so my approach really is look to your learners. The teachers have seriously the most power out of anybody in the system, because they are the ones that are working with kids day in and day out. They have the closest proximity. What they need, what their challenges are, what their strengths are, and how to move them along. And when teachers don't trust themselves and aren't trusted by those around them, we all lose out, because they're thinking, well, like, I know my kid needs this, but I have to stick with this 30-minute lesson that my district said I had to do. And so I think for me, it's really about having conversations. We're not trying to go against people, but if we're truly about learners, how do we continue to involve everybody in conversations so that we can look to learners and figure out what's best for them, not implement a program that someone 5 steps out of the classroom asked us to do. And we get in trouble when we do that, and then I'll talk to principals and they say, I wish my teachers would be learner centered. I wish my teachers would change their practices. I'm like, I just talked to your teacher and she said she couldn't because of that policy you put in place. Right. Mm-hmm. And so when we get people in the same room and when we start talking and bring the parents in too and the kids, I think we're so much more aligned than we believe. And we would cut out a lot of red tape and expectations and assumptions if we really started coming together and focusing on what we know is right for kids. And then the other thing, Aline, I would say is right now, we do have a lot of that red tape moved out of testing and procedures, and things have to be redone. So there is this opportunity to talk about what matters more, prioritize that, and start shedding our systems and practices of things that don't actually work for kids.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Ultimately, it is about the learner. And if parents, district leaders, teachers always consider that, then, I feel like you can't go wrong, because ultimately that's what, it's not about nothing else other than the children who are learning. Right. So I agree.
I want to address that too, because sometimes people say, oh, learner centered, that means it's just voice and choice and it's just chaos and you let people do whatever they want. That's not at all what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for just like, let kids run around. It is really about setting clear goals, having clear vision of what we're trying to accomplish, but also creating different pathways and allowing for choices within those parameters. I mean, as simple as like with my kids, do you want to do the dishes now or do you want to do them in an hour, right? There's simple choices, but it's still, the goal is clear. And I think that we sometimes conflate those two, that learner centered means that it's chaos, and that is not necessarily true.
I agree. I definitely agree with you on that. So if you could sum up the problem that your book addresses in education, how would you briefly sum that up?
Yeah, I think the biggest high level problem is that we collectively, and I say this as a world, as educators, as families, have aspirations for our kids to be healthy and happy and successful and enjoy their lives and do things that matter to them. So that we have this collective vision that I have yet for people to say they don't want. Yet our practices in schools are so often misaligned with how to get there. So the big problem is that even though we say these things and we have vision statements all over our walls of what we want kids to know and do and be critical and creative thinkers, the structures and systems demand compliance and standardization too often. And those systems don't develop the type of kids and the type of lives that we truly want for our young people.
Okay, definitely. Okay, so I'm going to pivot a little bit and
Sure.
address the big elephant in the room. We are in the middle of a global pandemic, and it has turned everyone's world upside down, especially teachers.
Yeah.
How can this book be helpful to teachers this upcoming school year in the midst of this pandemic?
Yeah, great question. And thank you for addressing the elephant in the room. My husband is a teacher, my mom was a teacher. So we're like deep in this, trying to figure out what the fall is going to look like. And so I think this book, as we shift practices in the fall, this, just in the spring, many people shifted practices overnight and redid lessons and made things accessible for kids in a virtual environment. And we likely have to do that in the fall. So this is an opportunity to really think about not just doing school at home and not just recreating all of these systems that we've had and these structures that do demand compliance and standardization. This is an opportunity to rethink what our goals are and how we design learning experiences to get to those goals. So this book provides lots of ideas pre-pandemic, but they're still very much aligned focus on, if we're focused on learning, we can focus on learner agency. We can focus on authentic learning. We can focus on more authentic and relevant performance assessments and more personalized opportunities for kids. And there's examples of teachers who have done this in the classroom that we can think about how we can bring those to the forefront as we are shifting practices and reimagining what our classrooms are in this new world. So that is my hope, is that we can see these strategies and ideas and really think about how to put them in place now that we have the opportunity that no one expected, nor did we want, but we have this opportunity now in the midst of chaos to really evolve our practices.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Well, within your book, you talk about how educators can value their students for their diverse talents,
Mm-hmm.
not just the traditional model of SMART. Can you expound upon this, and what would this look like in a classroom?
Yeah. So this came from a student who I was talking to, and he just said, "Can you, stop asking how, if I'm smart, and start trying to figure out how I'm smart." And I'm like, yes, that totally makes sense. So if you think about it in classrooms, what our goals again can still be the same. We might want kids to be able to convey a point, to find a main idea, but it doesn't always have to be in a traditional textbook. Read the passage, find the main idea, and write a sentence. My two kids are a year apart and very different, just like every single kid in our classroom. So how could you leverage their talents and their strengths to, some might put together a video, some might, be very good speaking orally, some might be very good writing out their ideas and talking in conversation, but not just honoring our traditional standardized methods of being smart, taking information, write it down, read fast, move on, but really thinking about how we bring in and leverage the expertise and talents of kids, and get them to see who they are and what questions they have. I think that it's so much more powerful, and you get them more motivated and excited about learning.
Absolutely. I value project-based learning
Mm-hmm.
and just offering a variety of activities for my students, because like you said, or like your students said, it's, how am I smart? So by giving them these different opportunities, you can really
Yeah,
see students shine within their skills. It doesn't have to be just reading a passage and answering a question. They could be a great artist. They could be a great writer, great singer, even a great, like leader of a play. You just, but by
totally.
providing all of these, different kinds of activities really helps to bring out the strengths of your learners. So that's something that I always love to see as a middle
Yeah.
school teacher. And so
Well,
I can
my
totally
my son, yeah, my son said to me recently during the pandemic, he said, I really love writing. And I was like, really? He goes, I love telling stories and I'm really good at it. He goes, but I hate writing. Right. And he could tell if in fourth grade, and this is why his teacher is so brilliant. He knew the difference being able to tell stories and create a through line and a story arc and being an author and telling a story, not just the physical act of writing and like capitalization, a period, mechanics. And too often we focus on the mechanics. And is your handwriting good? Is your punctuation right? Is your sentence structure okay? Is your spelling, perfect? Rather than how are your ideas? How are you putting together this sentence and this idea, and how are you conveying emotion, which ultimately is the bigger goal. You can edit that all the time, right? But we don't let kids see their full beauty and strengths and talents because we're so focused on the mechanics and the foundations of things that can prevent kids from actually showing up in ways that are really cool and unique.
Definitely. I love the idea of the empowered learner,
Yeah.
allowing kids to take ownership of their learning through exploration and ideation. So, how do you motivate educators to make this shift to this type of pedagogy?
Yeah. Well, I think my favorite way is by empowering educators. As I've taught lots of classes, lots of professional development as a coach, and early on, if I said, here's my great lesson, I did this in my classroom, you should do this now. That never worked, right? I worked really hard, put together all these things, and told people what sequence they should follow. And they looked at me like, I hate you, get out of my classroom, you're making my life harder. Um, of course, they would never say that, but they were thinking that. And so I quickly realized, gosh, how could I empower them to figure out what are your problems? What are the things you're struggling with? What are your questions? How can I help you fix this problem? How can we do research? How can we understand? And I think by empowering educators, they experience something new and different, and then they want to create those opportunities for their kids. I was teaching a class with a group of middle school teachers because they're awesome, and we were doing a project, and they were I had empowered them to pick a project that they wanted to solve and to do a 25-hour learning challenge where they had to learn something and really analyze their own learning experience. And they realized, wow, this is fun but hard. And when they had to reflect on their own learning, they then took those ideas and put them into their classrooms to help kids learn on their own and not just teach everything to them. And they came back and said, oh my gosh, these kids did better than I imagined. They went above and beyond, right? And the teachers did the same thing too. So I say often in the book that teachers create what they experience. And if we experience very structured professional development where everyone's telling you what to do and you're like having to break away, you then feel like you create those structures, even if it's inadvertently with your kids. But if you're empowered and you're inspired to, try something new and give them ownership, then the teachers often will do those very same things for their students.
That's so true. Well, I have one more question, and then I'll
Okay.
open it up to those who have questions. You can either unmute yourself and ask, or you can type it in the chat. But what would be some powerful takeaways from your book?
Um, some powerful takeaways. I think it goes back to this piece around when people are trusted and empowered, they go above and beyond. And there is this tremendous sense of fear that if I didn't cover it or if I didn't see them do it, they didn't learn it. And so we get these pacing guides and we have all these structures that make us feel safe and secure, like we've done our job. And at the end of the day, if kids don't learn and they're not growing and they don't know themselves and they're not inspired to solve problems and really go out in the world to do things that matter to them, I feel like that's the failure. And we're so focused on the failure as in like they didn't get an A on this test or they didn't do well on their standardized tests. But if we can, you know, step back and look at the bigger picture of what we want kids to know and do, and build those skills day in and day out, I think that that is, for me, the biggest takeaway is, are kids inspired? Are we helping improve their lives? Are we helping them develop the skills to continue to learn? And I think that, you know, my husband and I have talked about this a lot. He's a 10th grade teacher. He'll say his students, when he asks them about their strengths, they don't know in 10th grade. They don't know what they're passionate about. They don't know what their strengths are. They feel kind of like, you know, I just go through the motions in school. And so my hope with this book, and just in education, is if kids can know who they are, understand their strengths and the value they bring, and they can be inspired to keep learning and solving problems in our world that matter, I would call that success.
Definitely. Wow. Those are some very essential questions to the teaching field. Definitely. And I think all of us as teachers or former teachers, or even, you know, as parents, you know, have to stop and ask those questions. So thank you for sharing that. So at this time, with our last few minutes, I would like to open it up for any questions that anyone who's, you know, reading the book or would like to read the book, just anything, feel free to ask our author today. And I have if you could just unmute yourself.
So for me, thinking about the fall and the reality that we are probably going to be online as we start the new school year. I'm wondering if you have any advice for us as far as how to build a relationship.
Yeah.
I know that that's a really important piece in your book. You talk about how important it is to build relationships, but that's so hard to do in this kind of format. So do you have any advice for that?
Yeah, good question. The essential question, Renee. You know, so right as we started the pandemic, I started teaching a grad school class. And so similarly had to go, wait, I was expecting to see you guys face to face and I have to meet you online. And what I did was initially do one-on-one check-ins with people to build relationships, which helped a ton. Small groups, kind of checking in and creating learning communities. So it's not just you and the kids, it's also the kids amongst each other have to build relationships. And so I love the idea of creating learning communities. So you have 4 or 5 kids that kind of can rely on each other and go into breakout groups at times so they can be each other's own small group. And then also regular touch points of class meetings, especially up front. So doing things like show and tell, find something from your house that you want to share, or something special about you. Those are things that you know, help kids get to know each other, and you also get to know them. So I'd say definitely one-on-one check-ins, definitely small groups, class meetings. One of the things I did always in my own classroom is set the community agreements. So instead of coming in and saying, here is how you will behave, you know, what did we learn in the fall? How do we want to act as a community? Because if you come in and say like your screen has to be on and you have to do this and you have to do that, people feel less empowered. But if we say, oh, I love seeing your faces, and I would appreciate if you turn on the video and we can talk to each other. Those are things that we can agree upon. And then then you can have side conversations. I think the other thing is a learner profile. This is what I also did in class, but it's really important now. have kids really identify their strengths and share them with one another. Who are you? What do you care about? What are things you want to learn this year? I also strongly, strongly believe we're so afraid that kids missed out in the spring, and we're so afraid they're so far behind. If we look with an asset-based lens, what do they have? What did they gain? What sort of independence? What sort of questions? What are they learning about the world that they didn't know when we were in school? There's been a lot of things to learn. We have, equity and access and racism that have been brought to the forefront that kids are wondering about and curious. And how do we now address these things and help kids ask better questions and really think about their role? So those are a few things.
Do we have any more questions? And again, you can feel free to type them in the chat as well.
Katie.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. Renee and I teach together, and we've been, like she said, we've been doing book chats after we read chapters, and we're just loving it. So thank you. And I'm so glad Renee asked that, because that's what we talked about last time, is how important relationship building is, and especially if we do go remote, so those are some great ideas. But going back to your childhood story of the mouse and the motorcycle, I was the same way. Like, I was not a good reader growing up, but I truly did not enjoy reading. And it wasn't until I was a teenager that I finally found an author that I truly, really liked reading. So one of my biggest goals as a reading specialist is to really try to know my students so that I can match them with a book that I think is going to connect with their interests, or find that genre that I'm like, oh, this sounds like you. But do you have any other advice for how we can get kids to just enjoy reading and actually like it? Because it just kills me when I know, I'm like, here's a kid like me that just is like fake reading and lying that they actually read. And that's probably like one of my number one goals, is to get kids to enjoy it.
Yeah. Similar. I think a few things that really work. One, reading, I believe reading doesn't just have to be a book in your hand, right? Like, audiobooks are great. My kids, my son was a reluctant reader, and it depends on what he's reading. But my husband started playing the Harry Potter series for them in the car, and they listened together, the three of them, and he started listening and hearing the characters and really understanding that. And he couldn't wait anymore. He ripped through the series because he couldn't sit in the car. So sometimes reluctant readers, myself included, it's like, I can't even get into the book because it's so hard, and I just don't have the muscle. So audiobooks are great ways for kids to hear stories, understand the structure, and then want to be able to read more, because they can build that confidence. Also, I love book clubs. Some of the kids are social. So if my peers are reading it and we get to choose some books and read together, that's motivating and inspiring. We start talking about it, and it can help me more deeply understand the book. And then sometimes it's like articles. Again, like, we were just on vacation. My son, he picked up the back of a bag that had the history of a town and read it verbatim, because he was so motivated by the history of the town. And that's reading, right? I'm like, that was super fluent. You got these words, you made sense of it. And so what are the, not just the books, but what are the things they're interested in? And part of that is like, what problems are you trying to solve again? Oh, you're curious about Minecraft? Oh, why don't you go figure that out? And they have to read and watch videos and make sense of all these things too.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
And I would like to kind of chime in, having taught language arts for 9 years. So reading was definitely something we did quite frequently in the classroom. You know, I definitely agree having a variety of reading materials, letting students know, like, it doesn't just have to be a chapter book. It could be a magazine, or if you know, are into comics, you know, you can, you know, bring those as well when we had time specifically for reading. But what I found within the classroom setting was that just even their physical placement made a difference. And so, like, if they're sitting at their desk, you know, reading just didn't seem as fun. So if I said, okay, well, you can build a reading fort. So bring everything that you're going to need to bring your, to build your reading fort in class, you know, then they would do that and they'd get excited. So everyone would come in with their materials and, you know, so they can hide away in their reading fort. Or, you know, having locations like pillows on the floor, like, oh, you can lay down and read. You don't have to just sit in your desk. You can go read on the pillow and lay down, and everyone go find your corner, wherever it may be, and you can read how you want. And so even in a virtual setting, it could play out with, you know, you can have a little contest, you know, a picture contest. Who has, you know, take a picture of your reading nook or your,
I love that.
yeah, your reading area, design your own reading fort and take a picture, and we're going to share it the next time we come to our virtual classroom. And just,
Love
you know,
that.
kind of having fun with the idea of reading, and that kind of, you know, motivates them or gets them excited. Or even an activity that I did was have my students create a bookstagram post. I said, you know, go ahead and take the book that you're reading, create your own bookstagram, and we'll post it on the school's Instagram site or however. But just getting them excited with the idea of reading, and
Yeah.
just different approaches, and I found that to be quite helpful too.
Yeah, Alina, as you said that, so I don't know if you guys have heard about book snaps that Tara Martin, but so if you look at book snaps, there's a whole bunch of adults that are doing it, but also with kids, they can like highlight passages and put emojis, and so it brings the page to life on things that are fun and connections that they're making. It's basically like annotating text, but digitally, where you can share them in a way that is also motivating for adults and kids.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I know our time is, you know, pretty much concluded. So if there are there any other questions? I didn't want to overlook anyone. Okay, perfect. Well, I know we have Renee and Kelly who are already doing a book club. So you own the book, Learner-Centered Innovation. But I noticed that we have a couple of other people on the call as well, on the webinar, I should say. And I just wanted to let you know that Dr. Katie Martin has agreed to give away a book, her book, Learner-Centered Innovation. And so, you know, hey, you know, I'm not going to say, Kelly and Renee, that you can't get one, because maybe you know an educator who you would like to share it with. So what we will do is I will follow up after this webinar, and it will be completely randomly selected. I will announce the winner in our follow-up recorded webinar that I'll send to you. And yeah, and so I would just like to say thank you, Dr. Katie Martin, for joining us today for this book talk, and thank you to all of those who have attended, and we just really appreciate you and just encourage you to just stay strong out there. We know that the world that we live in is, you know, just a little crazy right now, but you know, I'm hopeful that it will get better.
Yeah. Yeah, and thank you. And if you have questions as you're reading, don't hesitate to reach out. I would love to connect, and just grateful for the work you guys are doing and thinking of you in the fall for sure. We're all going to be in this together, trying to figure it out.
Definitely. So I will include the information to connect with Dr. Katie Martin if you have any questions about anything. So thank you all for your time and attention, and we hope that you have a wonderful day.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. You're welcome. Bye.